I had a boss one time who was such a control freak that she demanded to know specifically why I was calling out sick, wildly illegal where I live, one day. And for reference, I am typically the guy who never gets sick, so it wasn't an attendance issue. I told her I think I had food poisoning. Turned out to be true and actually wrote a ULPT based off this story a while back, and she kept pressing me as to explain what my symptoms were and why I couldn't make it in all via text. I had finally had enough and was like, look, I'm not physically capable of working today and you are not allowed to ask me personal questions about illness and medical history. She threatened me with a write-up if I couldn't specifically explain/prove why I couldn't make it into work. This is where the ProRevenge comes in. I was about to send her something horrific that she could not unsee, and she wouldn't be able to do jack crap about it since she technically asked for it. Being that I was living in the bathroom for more than 2 days, this inquiry was day 1 and had aggressive diarrhea every 15 to 30 minutes and the worst abdominal pain I've ever experienced. I lost my crap, haha, and took a pretty disturbing picture of me painting the bowl brown right before I flushed and sent it to her. No joke, it looked like I power washed the inside of the toilet with feces and built a turd island in the middle of the water. It honestly looked like a poop volcano had erupted. I had no idea your bowels could contain so much. This is happening every 15 to 30 minutes and I haven't been able to leave the bathroom for the last 6 hours. Here is your proof. Check the timestamp. Also sent a screen of the timestamp. I'll let you know as soon as I can if I'll be in tomorrow. So after 3 days off I show up for my shift, sleep deprived and sore from sleeping in my bathtub or on the floor for 2.5 days. A-hole not having any of it, but I was finally through the worst. She immediately escorts me into her office, where our Agent Lauer's rep is waiting for me, and we all sit down. He has paperwork in front of him, and is discussing the incident with me, and gets me to acknowledge what I did, and that sending unprovoked and offensive content to coworkers constitutes harassment and blah blah blah, right before he asks me to sign a final write-up. If you do something like this again, you're fired. Before signing I asked him, did she tell you why I sent this? He was dumbfounded and said this isn't really excusable and basically handed me a screenshot printout of the text messages where the speech deleted everything in the exchange in her phone, but me saying sorry, but I need to take a sick day today, and the picture. I laughed and handed him my phone and said here is the full exchange. He asked me to leave and give them a few minutes. About 10 minutes later he calls me in by myself and explained what I already knew, that she was the harasser and that she had aggressively violated privacy laws and would be dealt with, and to call him if anything like this ever happens again. I found out from one of the assistant managers that she ended up getting a final written notice and was super close to being fired, and it prevented her from getting a big promotion that she was being looked at for. So, if you ever come across a dickhead boss who wants to play doctor and question your sick leave, send them diarrhea pics, and they'll either STF you or give you lawsuit material. This isn't my story. It happened to my ex-classmate's dad, but it's too sweet of a story to not share. His dad is a pretty wealthy guy and owns his own construction business. My classmate always showed up in fancy clothes and cars. One day, dad walks into a car dealership. He was interested in buying a Mercedes G-Wagon. He went inside and was ignored for almost an hour while other cuts were treated. Eventually a couple of salesmen approach dad and ask him what he's doing here. Sad starts asking about the cars. The salesmen were very dismissive and sarcastic in response to him. It's clear they aren't taking him seriously and begin to leave. Dad becomes irritated and asks what their problem was. They argue for a minute when the manager comes and tells dad to leave. Dad had just come from work and was wearing slightly dirty jeans, boots and a shirt. He's also a dark-skinned individual. Both of these factors probably made him look lower class in their eyes. Little did they know, a few weeks later dad ends up purchasing the car at another dealership. He negotiated free car washes for life as he traded in one of his luxury cars. Apparently he was able to go to other dealerships in the area who authorized the same thing regarding car washes. Dad ends up going to first dealership and throws the keys on the front counter. He demanded a car wash. The same manager eventually came by to object, but dad showed him all the paperwork. He looked a bit shocked and begrudgingly got the process started. Dad has been going back almost every day for car washes. He always cheekily smiles at all the staff members with a crap-eating grin as a greeting, especially the 2 salesmen. They now just hang their head in shame and walk away whenever they see him. This happened about a decade ago. Long story, but worth the read. I worked for a large drug chain as a frontline manager. For this chain, the pharmacist is the owner of the shop. They run it, but the company still owns the whole thing. I guess it's like they are a corporate franchisee. Anyways, this shop had a history of not being able to keep a manager in the role I just took on for very long. The training was practically non-existent and nothing was documented. On with the show. One day, within my first 3 months, I'm sick as a dog and can barely get out of bed. As it's a health and wellness business, and as I couldn't work, even if I wanted to, I called into the back of the house manager. This manager acts as the assistant manager to the owner as they were real life friends. I said I was sick and couldn't be into work. I was asked who would be covering for me, as I had to open the shop every day, and I said I didn't know. I was told that as a manager I was responsible for this, and needed to find someone. Fair enough. Even though nobody told me about this, I pulled out my staff listing and found someone to cover my shift who had keys and could open the store. Keep in mind that most of my staff were part-time students at the time and I only had one full-time employee that worked mom-free. When I got into work the next day, the assistant manager told me that I couldn't call in sick and that the next time I called in sick I shouldn't bother coming back. I was shocked, as this is very unprofessional, and I didn't expect it coming from the second in command at the store. My one full-time employee starts telling me that I'm the best manager they've had for the last 2 years, and during that time they went through 6 managers before me. I'm told that I've done more in my time there than all the previous managers did in total. Things like having the staff cash out on company time, not making people stay to find hours recount on their own time, basically not breaking labor laws, lol. So, the owner calls me into their office and tells me that due to my sick day I won't be paid for it as I'm still on probation, and that the accountant who does the payroll will be instructed as such. This was unexpected as I'm a salaried employee, and probation or not, I know this isn't right, but I agree and get on with my day. Being that there were lots of part-time students that worked here, we had an actual punch clock to clock in and clock out for all employees, including me. Being a salaried manager, whenever one of my staff couldn't work, and if I couldn't find a replacement, I ended up covering the shift myself. I looked at it like an opportunity to get to know my evening staff better as I usually never saw them. On the paycheck that my sick day happened, I also needed to cover a few extra shifts for other employees, as everyone seems to get sick at about the same time, and as the manager, I'm the one who totals up the time cards prior to giving them over to the accountant. These time cards can be faked as they are physically punched and encoded with dates and times from the machine. I handed my team's time cards with mine on top to the accountant, who looks at me and reminds me about the instructions she's gotten from the owner. She didn't like it, but had her orders. I tell her that I understand, and here is my time card. She looks at it, raises her eyebrows at me, and before she can ask a question, I remind her that I'm not a salaried employee as I'm still on probation, and that normal pay rules should apply, even though this is illegal. She looks at me, smiles and confirms that was what she was told by the owner. It turns out that deducting the sick day I missed, but adding on the 3 extra shifts I had to work, that period to cover for other staff not showing up, I ended up working 96 hours that payday. So, because I wasn't salaried, the accountant paid me time and a half for the extra 16 hours I worked. Because I knew that these things weren't really legal, I decided I was done with this company and this boss. I emailed my friend who helped me get the job, who just happened to be the head of their corporate security, with the story I just told, and gave him permission to send it to whoever he thinks would need to see it. Later that week, I got a call from another employer asking if I could start immediately. I said yes of course, and went back into work. This call happened just after I had gotten home from work. Yes, before cell phones were a thing. I walked into work, went into the back office to collect my personal effects, and came back out. My shift supervisor was perplexed as I had just left for the night. I shook his hand and told him that it was nice working with him. He was shocked and asked, "You're firing me?" I actually lowlaid at that and told him, "No, I'm quitting. You get to keep working here." I went to hand my keys and resignation to the night pharmacist and told them to pass it on to the owner. My letter consisted of "I quit" sign opus. I went back a few weeks later to get some stuff. I still shop there as it's close to my home, and the one full-time employee says hi with a big smile and tells me the following in hushed tones. "A few days after you left, some suits from head office came in, had a meeting with the owner, and left. When the owner left after that day, they haven't seen the owner since. Seems the suits came and took the store away from them, based on owner's inability to keep your old position filled." Employee didn't know about the email I sent to the head of security, but when I mentioned it, the employee lit up like a light bulb and said, "So that's why." The icing on the cake for me was that the owner knew about this connection I had with the head of security, as they were listed as a reference and the owner contacted them directly about the referral. Doing illegal stuff to someone with a direct line to the head of security is probably not a good idea. Very early in my career, I got a job working as a sound and lighting tech at a big music and dance venue in West London. It was a pretty decent job. Wednesday through Saturday we had various themed nights, and most weeks we had various well-known bands come in on a Monday and or Tuesday. Bands like Ub 40, The Jam, The Stranglers, The Thompson Twins, Killing Joke, an epic story in itself, although not one of Revenge, and many others. The venue had for many years a reputation for ballroom dancing. It had the largest sprung maple dance floor in the UK, and the BBC frequently came in to record episodes of Come Dancing, a popular TV show in the 70s and 80s. You could get around 2,500 people in the venue, and when we had concerts, the tables around the periphery of the dance floor were removed, so we could fill the venue to capacity. Running around all four sides of the rectangular arena was a balcony, which had two bars, the sound and lighting control room and importantly 6 dressing rooms directly about the stage area that was along one of the long arms of the rectangle. Bear in mind that for what should be obvious reasons this area was out of bounds to the punters. One of the more interesting regular nights was Wednesday's Over 25's night, an evening that catered to, shall we say, the older fraternitithos that who had cut their teeth socially in the 40s, 50s, and 60s and for whom the venue held a certain degree of nostalgia. You would think that these older patrons would know how to conduct themselves. Not a bit of it. There would frequently be punters going handbags at 20 paces with each other, to the endless frustration of the bouncers, and on at least 2 occasions I witnessed a couple of old boys who were well into their 60s swaving flick knives at each other. There were also quite a few ladies attending how can one put this delicately, we're less enamored of the Tupsakorean arts paresi than they were of taking the concept of dancing, being the vertical expression of horizontal intent, and applying it to a means of gaining a quid pro quo financially. This practice was something of an open secret among the staff, and, looking back on the situation, I'm almost certain there was some kind of financial kickback with the senior management who always looked the other way. And so it came to pass, gentle reader, that I'm up in the control room one afternoon when the chief electrician pops his head around the door and asks me if I'd been into dressing room 6 recently. Other than checking to see if the bulbs were working, a matter of a few seconds, I said no. He then beckoned me to follow him. Intrigued, I trotted after him and went into dressing room 6 to be confronted by a rather odd sight. There was a large hole in the brickwork on the wall that faced into dressing room 5. Going into dressing room 5, I noticed a large mirror covering said hole. Further examination showed that this was, in fact, a one-way mirror. It took but a moment to make a theoretical connection to the activities of the Wednesday nights. That evening, I approached a couple of my colleagues on the upper bar and asked them to keep an eye on the stage right entrance to the dressing rooms. Sure enough, they reported seeing couples sneaking into the area, followed shortly thereafter by certain members of senior management. Over the next couple of weeks, I conspired to find myself in the dressing room area, ostensibly to use the access ladder to the roof area to go and turn on the extractor fans. Sure enough, the sounds emanating from the 2 dressing rooms left little to the imagination. Put bluntly, the local tarts were pulling clients and taking them up to dressing room 5, while the senior management crowded into number 6 and got their jollies via the one-way mirror. As you might imagine, this intelligence spread rapidly but covertly throughout the entire lower end staff. In particular, many of the bar staff were female, and they were justifiably outraged at such heinous behavior. We would almost always get together after work on a Saturday to socialize at someone's house, and so on one particular Saturday we held a council of war. On the following Tuesday we knew that there was going to be a major gig at the venue, which was pretty much already sold out. Someone then had the bright idea of going on strike. That's right folks, the entire bar staff and tech crew decided en masse that we would simply not turn up on Tuesday evening. This amounted to a little over 20 people. We knew that they'd normally taking money hand over fist at the bars, with no staff to serve the thirsty punters. The venue would be therefore losing some serious coin. Come the aforesaid Tuesday evening, not a single member of the staff showed up. On Wednesday, everyone rocks up to work to be confronted by a furious management. Boy, were they pissed. We learned that it had been absolute chaos, with the management and a few of the bouncers having to roll up their sleeves and serve behind the bars. Even with this, there was nowhere near enough staff to serve 2500 PR plus they lost a fortune in bar sales. We were then all threatened with termination, our somewhat hollow threat, as if we had all been booted out there and then there'd be no one to serve or do any work that evening. It was then that we played our trump card. A few days earlier I had taken the precaution of taking some photos of the offending mirror installation, which also neatly demonstrated the one-way nature of the setup. We gave them an ultimatum: either remove the mirror and block up the hole, or the whole set of photos would be sent to head office, where we felt sure the top brass would be very interested in the shenanigans perpetrated by senior management in one of their major venues. We also felt sure that the local police station, literally next doors, would express a similar interest in the goings on. You could almost hear the air leaking out as the management bods visibly deflated right in front of our eyes. In short, our demands were met without question and no one got the sack. A few days later we found that the head honcho had moved on to pastures new and a new manager had taken over. Final score: venue staff 4, management 0. If you enjoyed the stories, slap the like and subscribe button for more of them, and don't forget to support the original writers with an upvote. Links are in the description. Peace out, and catch you tomorrow.